before we begin the session, I request everyone present here to keep their cell phone on silent mode, please. Thank you. Good morning, all dignitaries and guests. I feel privileged to extend my warm welcome to all of you present here for the third day of the 3rd Brahmaputra Literary Festival 2019 in Guwahati. Today's session is called Catch Them Young, Writing for Generation X to Capture Their Imagination. The aim of this session will be to apprise aspiring writers and authors about the writing style during the late 70s. Without any further delay, I would like to introduce our panelists on the dais. Tenjin, a Tibetan writer and activist, has designed workshops in creative writing, short and medium courses for school and colleges. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause. Meghna Pant, known as one of the India's best writers, her books has been published to critical and commercial acclaim. Pant is a vociferous feminist and advocate of gender equality. Novelin Chakrabarti is the best-selling author of 11 best-selling thriller novels and short story collection titled Cheaters. Known for his twists, dark plots, and strong female protagonist, he is also referred as the Sidney Sheldon of India. Please give a big round of applause. Kiran Mandral, an award-winning author, TEDx speaker, columnist, mentor with Vital Voices Global Mentoring Walk 2017 and festival curator. She has been awarded by the Indian Council of the UN Relation Government of India for excellence in the field of writing. Sok Chanpal was born into a peasant family in Champong Cham, Cambodia. He has written 5 novels, 20 short stories, 3 screenplays, and a good number of songs, many of which became very popular. He is with his translator, Feena. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Feena as well. Yanis Jonas, a prose writer. He has written plays and short prose, including for children. His plays has been adopted for the theatre performance and is currently being shot as a film. After the panelist discussion is over, we will begin the question and answer round. But before that, I would like to request Tenjin sir to proceed with the session. Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. We are sorry we are a bit late in starting. So writing, that too, writing and encouraging, inspiring young people to write. So this is the session today, and we are relatively young. We would like to start from our own stories of how we started and why writing is so very important for us. With each of us making an opening speech for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then of course then we can have question answers among ourselves, and then we'll open the floor for all of you, anyone who wants to take part in this. So the opening remark, would Kiran like to start?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tenzin, for that. Why did I start writing? I think I didn't know what else to do with myself. As a child, one read a lot and one was thankful to the books that one had, which awakened the desire to tell stories, not all of which were very good, of course. And but you know, parents being parents, they encourage you, and then you inflict yourself upon the world. I think that's what happens. And I think for writing, for most of us writers, it is not something that you really consciously set out to do. It is a calling, so to speak. You write because you don't know what else you would do with yourself. It comes from within. There are tales that you have to tell. There is so much within you that if you don't let it out in some way, you would go crazy. It's also good for all creative people. I think writing more so for writers. That's how I began, just telling little stories, little fairy tales, and they grew and they grew. And when I was 40, I decided enough of writing in my diaries. It's time to inflict it out in the world. That's my story. What about you, Dennis?
Well, I wanted to be a writer since I was like 13 years old, maybe, because I was reading a lot and I just wanted to be a part of this world, which is so separate as it seemed to me from reality. But I just had this wish to write, but not really an idea what could I write about, and so it went on. And my debut as a writer was only when I was 33 years old, so I had to wait for 20 years till I found a subject what to write about. Okay, a little less because it took time to write this book, yeah, but so I started later, but I've always had this wish. At one point I wasn't even sure that I will succeed, but yeah, here I am somehow.
With me, the story is a little different. One of my first lines I've written was, I'm more of an Indian, except for my chinky Tibetan face. I think one of the first things that was coming to me, which I felt I needed to explain, was my identity. This is one comfortable zone in the northeast and also in the Himalayas. But the moment we go into what is called India, then immediately you become Chinky, Chingchong, Momo, Chinese, whatever. So the first thing that you are having to answer is your face. Why do you have such a face in a host of, for example, in South India or Bombay or Delhi or any other places? So the first thing you are having to answer is the story of your face, your identity. So I started from there. But my desire to write is not just to explain to others of their curiosity, but a story I wanted to tell. And the story I want to tell is the story of our country, or the situation that we are in. I'm a Tibetan refugee. And our ways of fighting for freedom from China is not to carry guns and kill them. That's not how we believe how we could win freedom. We believe we can win freedom by being strong, by being kind, by being understanding, by rationalizing, by gaining sympathy and support from people around the world. So I always wanted to write the Tibet story from childhood. I was in the 5th standard, class 5, when I made a promise to myself that when I grow up, I'm going to be a freedom fighter. And my weapon is going to be my pen, which I carry even today. So it's a deep conviction with which I wanted to write. But ours was a small refugee school. We didn't have a library. I started reading and writing English from Tingle comic books. And those who are in India, especially little elder generation, mine, we used to look at Tingle comics as the encyclopedia. Because there was one comic book which had stories and paintings and drawings and information about Alaska and igloos and kimono and Mount Vesuvius, difference between astronauts and cosmonauts. All of that was how I learned English language from there. And still it was not enough for me to be able to write. So throughout my school years, it was a struggle for me to be able to speak and write English. And this I'm sure we all can relate as second language speakers and writers. But I worked extra hard on my English. When I went to college in Madras, They, of course, couldn't understand my Tibetan, and there was no Hindi there. So I picked up Tamil in Madras. But the most important language of communication was English. So I worked very hard and started to write. And compared to many other writers, I started very late, because I did not have the language facility. It was only when I was in Bombay University, when I was doing my MA, there I started to write my first lines of poems. And this is what I have to say in the opening speech. Thank you.
That's a pretty awesome story. Good morning, all of you. The first thing I have to tell you all is I'm pretty much a Guwahati boy, and but I'm flying in from Mumbai, and I didn't know that I lived long enough to say this. Mumbai is colder than Guwahati. Can you beat that? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is. Like Mumbai is 11. I got to know Guwahati was 18 yesterday.
It was 8 when I left.
Yeah, so I had to. I don't know. I should be happy or sad about it, because Guwahati is my place. And so yeah, how did I start off? I was not born in Guwahati, but I was born in Silchar, Assam, part of Assam, and I spent my childhood in Guwahati, and then went Kolkata to Lucknow, and I had so many plans about life. Till 16 or 17, I wanted to become a lot of things. I wanted to become a sports person. I wanted to become a neurosurgeon. I wanted to become this, that, everything. Except that I had no clue I'll end up becoming a writer. At 20, I guess, when things, it's one of those fields that I don't think anybody can plan as such to come and, at 20, 19 or 20, you can say that you want to become a, you can go to a parent and say, I want to become a writer, because they will give you very shrewd looks, and obviously they will judge you, and not to blame them. So what happened with me was all my options and plans were slowly getting chucked off. I couldn't become a sports person. I could not crack AFMC because I wanted to go to the Armed Forces Medical Wing. I couldn't crack that, and I had no clue for there was 1 year or 6 months. I had no clue what I was doing with my life, and and then suddenly, I don't know how it happened exactly. I cannot explain it. I just started getting plots and characters in my mind, and within 2 months I ended up writing 30 odd short stories only for myself. And while writing those stories, I realized that this is it. This is what I want to do. And mind you, I didn't want to write. Writing for me is an eventuality. What I love and cannot help give up is thinking. I think what makes writers is his or her thoughts. Writing eventually obviously is an expression. It will come out. It's an eventuality. You cannot have too many thoughts inside your mind. You have to get it out. So for me, thinking is way more important for me personally than just the process of writing. And here I am. This is my 13th book, which is supposed to. This is the right time to plug in my book. So all these things should be done first when everyone is fresh. So before you guys get bored. So this is a book, 13th book, coming out on 14th of Feb, Valentine's Day. It's a very different book than what I've written till now, because I'm known for my thrillers. And this is a very intense relationship drama. The story starts off from Christian Basti, Guwahati. Yeah. So, the story starts in 1996, and this is exactly in 1996. Christian Basti still has it. There's a Reserve Bank officer's quarters there. There used to be a mango tree inside it, and I had seen that mango tree. I've lived there, and the story starts off from there. Two kids meet over mango, and a journey begins. So I'm just waiting for you guys to read it, and this book is special. Every book is special, and I know authors go around and tell that every story is their baby and all. And whoever has been following me knows that I always say my books are my ladies, and they're not my babies. So this one is special because this is inspired by 3 women in my life who has been who have altered my life in various stages. And whatever progressive thinker I am, the human I am, is somewhere they have influenced me to be that. I'm not going to take their names, but then they're very special. They know it. And I have told this story, though it's not my personal, it's not an autobiography that I've written. But you know, sometimes what happens is that when an author writes, it's not only the plot that can be personal, but the feelings that he writes, the feelings that the character feels for someone else, that's there. Some dialogues has happened in real life, which is there out in the book. Nobody will be able to make out, you know, what's real and what's unreal, because I'm a thriller writer, so I don't give it that easily. But I hope you guys enjoy the story, Half Torn Hearts. It's about Raisa Barua, it's about Nirman Bose, and it's about Sana Agarwal. And I'll look forward to your feedback on that, and I'll just shut up for now and pass on the mic.
So let me start by asking you guys in the audience, how many of you are looking at us here today and saying, oh my God, I want their life, and I want to be a writer as well? And please be honest, this is the time for honesty. Any of you? Any aspiring writers? Any of you who want to write a book or publish a book or have dreams of one day becoming best authors? Great. Please don't. It is, you're not looking at authors here, you're looking at a bunch of very masochistic people who are, I don't know, driven by some sort of demon that just doesn't leave us. Writing is a very, very difficult profession, and I say this because not only is the process of writing down a book, there are angst involved in the thinking, as normally just mentioned, in justifying your existence, as Tenzin also said. What comes out of the writing also, the marketing process, the getting published process, being, you know, watching people like Taimur Ali Khan become famous while you're not. You know, you can't write for money because most of the authors, and this is an actual fact, 90% of authors make less than 50,000 rupees a year. Can any of you guess how much a first-time author gets paid for their first book as an advance? Any of you, after putting in 2-3 years of their life in writing and thinking about the book and finding a publisher, just hazard a guess. For 2-3 years of your time, you get paid on average 30 to 40,000 rupees as an advance, a first-time writer. So you don't write to become rich. You don't also write to become famous, right? There are very, very few authors in India today who are actually famous. Some are well-known, some have won awards, some are reputed, some are respected. But a second-rate actor in a second-rate TV show will be more famous than you'll ever be as a writer. And I'm talking about Kapil Sharma here, right? So you can't become famous by being a writer, you can't become rich by being a writer. So what are you really getting out of becoming a writer? And what you're seeing here on the podium today, on the stage today, it is literally 5% of our entire writing journey. So for me also, I started off not wanting to be a writer. I had written a little, dabbled a bit in writing short stories when I was a teenager. But I think when you're young and skittish, that discipline of sitting down in a place and actually pouring out words is very, very difficult. When I was in my late 20s, I was in an abusive relationship, and that was the time when I really found solace in words. I was in New York, and you know, I didn't want to cope with my reality, so I used words and stories as a way to distance myself from my own truth. I started training myself. I took a lot of writing courses. I understood how to write properly. I understood how to get published properly. And I was very certain that I only want to be published by the top publishers, otherwise I won't publish. So I had that kind of I don't know, pride as a writer that I want to. I think my work should be good enough for a good publisher. It took me almost a year to figure out how to even get published, because it's not, you know, you finish writing a book after so much effort and then you say, oh my God, why are publishers not calling me up and, you know, knocking on my door and saying, hey, you're going to be the next, you know, Salman Rushdie or Chetan Bhagat or whatever your icon is. That's not how it works. You have to approach the publishers, and the whole industry is extremely opaque. Right? And you don't know, most people don't know what goes into a package, what goes into a query letter. So I figured all that out. It took me almost a year, and then I sent out an email to 5 of the top publishers in our country, and within 2 hours, one of the top publishers replied and they picked up my book. So I signed a contract for 1.5Y, which was my debut novel, very, very easily. And then my second book, Happy Birthday, it's a short story collection. It was picked up by Random House because they read 1.5Y and they really liked it. So they actually approached me saying, do you have anything else? And for those of you who write short stories, they're extremely difficult to get published. You know, they're the Voldemort of literature. nobody wants to acknowledge that they exist. But that short story collection was, won many awards. It was critically acclaimed. It got amazing blurbs by authors like Chitra Banerjee, Deva Karuni, and Ashwin Sanghi, Jeet Thayil, Namita Gokhale. So I found the whole journey of writing books and publishing suddenly come from a place of angst to a place of magical, beauty. So I think that also is something that does happen, that if you stay true to your voice, if you stay true to your craft, if you stay true to what is within you, I think your dreams do come true. And I've now published a book, my most recent one, How to Get Published. It just hit bookstores yesterday actually. And I know I've struggled a lot to become a writer, to become a critically acclaimed writer. So I've written a book to help aspiring writers struggle a little bit less than I did. So this book guides you through the entire process of how to write a book, how to publish a book, how to sell a book. And the best part is, the last section of the book are essays by top authors like Jeffrey Archer, Twinkle Khanna, Shobha Dey, and Kiran also here has written a beautiful essay for the book. So I've got the top, Durjoy Datta, who's such a hot favorite, I believe, amongst the young crowd. So all of them have written about what it means to get published. So if you're looking to achieve your dream of becoming a writer, I would advise that do your homework before you do anything else.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chan Park, and I'm so happy to be on stage. But I always feel I'm not ready for the stage, and this is what I always. It's always become to be my writing. So I always write my experience to show the people, and I think it will help them. Like now, I'm not confident at all with my English, so I'm thank you so much for my sister Pina. She tried to, she helped me to translate the other writer speaking, so I understand about the other writer stories. Yes, and I feel we have many things in common. Yes. For me, writing is mean everything. I think I use writing to find myself as well. I like writing. I don't know what kind of writing I like. So I write novel, I write short story, I write song lyrics, I write screenplays of film, and I do everything in writing, and till now it's 10 years. 10 years I be a writer in Cambodia, and I just know I was born as a writer, and I really enjoy the life of writers. In here last 2 days, I get the inspiration a lot from the festival. I write a poem yesterday when I see the people on stage talk about the poem, so I start to write. Yes, I want to read the poem. Yes, okay. I have 3 poems, but one in my language and that two in English, so I will read in English. Okay. I talk with my friend. I say it is not it is a poem or not, and he say if I say it's a poem, it's the poem because the poem is everything in heart. Yeah. Okay, it's okay. I feel I am not one person. When I am home, I am a lazy man. At school, I am a stupid person. In the society, I become a selfish one. With my writing, I am a hero. On stage, I am a star. Life is so challenging.
So how can I adapt to the situation? Who exactly I am? Who I become to be then? Why I exist here? And the other poem. Life is easy, but why you are making it hard? It's not just good or bad as what you see. It may be nothing, but it's always the best experience. Life is too real, so why you don't want to try? Believe me, all the problems are just making the situation better. I write this poem, I write this because when I see the stage yesterday, I see something, or it's always complicated in the start, but it's always become the way to make it better. Yes, I think, and thank you for the speech.
Okay, now I have two questions that we can go around and see, and also see whoever can go first or second or whatever. Two questions. One question is, what is your present relationship with writing? Are you a full-time writer, or is writing your passion? Is your writing your source of income, occupation, or are you editor, critic, or whatever? So look at this, all of us. What is your relationship with writing? Number one. Number two, what is one secret skill of yours that you would like to share with the audience today? There may be many, I'm sure. What is one secret skill that you would like to share with the writers today? Yeah? So two questions. So who wants to go first on this?
What is my present relationship with writing? I think writing is my passion. It is definitely not my source of income. As Meghna put it, there are very few writers in India who make enough to have it as a full-time source of income. So writing is what happens between my day job. My day job is Ideas Editor at She the People right now. I also curate writers' festivals, the Women Writers' Festivals across 6 cities and various other events. So writing is what I must do. My job is what I have to do. And my relationship with writing is, I think writing is like, to use a very bad metaphor, like a mistress. You keep going back to it over and over again, and it draws you to it because there's, as I said before, you can't turn away from it. There's a demon, as other panelists have also said, you have to do it. So that is what I do. I write because I must. There are stories I have to tell, because I enjoy it. And also, I think as creative persons, we are constantly seeking for outlets to express the chaos in our minds. We'll go schizophrenic.
In order to be considered to be from that country. So really, in that case, the editorial process was an entire reshaping. By contrast with my novel, Beside Myself, I had very little editing. I think very much like you, I had a similar experience of having worked as an editor, and so my text perhaps was more edited than previous manuscripts that the team had dealt with. But nonetheless, I did really value the just small questions, and often it's asking questions. Or why have you done that like that? Or why does that character do this? Or what about if you did this? Leaving it open, because I think the best instances of writing and editing, the best relationships are built on respect. The editor respects the effort the writer has made to write the book, the research they've done, the often years they've spent with this subject. And the writer, in turn, should respect the editor's expertise, their experience working on a number of books over many years, their market knowledge, and their ability to take the wider view of what readers are likely to see in a book. And so respect, I think, has to be at the basis of that relationship.
For a few months and then go back to it. You see what's working and what's not, because you have that emotion.
We see some of the situations that your cartoons revealed are often when respect is lacking on one side or the other. It can be difficult because you can sometimes profoundly disagree. One editor may think that something very much has to come out of a book or be put into a book, whereas the writer may be very much against that. But usually, if you go away and give it some thought, play with it, you can find a solution that answers both those needs. And it may not be the obvious one, and it may not be the one that was top of the mind for both those people when they first discussed it. But ultimately, you can find your way to something that makes the book stronger. And that's the job, really. Editing is to make a piece of work stronger, so that it can communicate best.
I just wanted to add to that, yes, the relationship between an author and an editor is most important. And that relationship should have trust as well as respect. So the author must trust the editor and the editor must trust the author. And a very good way of doing it I discovered is, when an author gives the book to the editor, the author must also sort of express to the editor what is it that he or she wants the reader to take away from the book. Then that becomes the destination and purpose of the editor as well. And so your book really becomes stronger the way you want, as an author, you want it to be. So that's why the trust has to be very important. And an editor, at the end of the day, is generally dances over your manuscript, with very light beat. So that there's no change of voice. The editor can't put his or her voice into it. The author's voice must remain, and yet the book must come out to be stronger.
Yes, that's true, Shatapa. In the final analysis, it's about what the book deserves. Because the book goes beyond the author and the editor and the publisher. It's as if a book has a destiny of its own once it's out there.
Good possibility that idea will come, yes. So it is torture at the table. And
the publishing house come together to give the book the best it deserves so that it then goes forward on its journey. Lisa, you commissioned both fiction and non-fiction titles. So if you could just tell us how you approach these two genres differently. Because they're very different in their approach to different subjects.
That's correct. But again, I just wanted to add that when it comes to the editor-author relationship, in fact, recently I was having a chat with a colleague about this subject, and we came to the conclusion that finding a good editor is almost like finding a good therapist. Because as an author, you're really laying bare, something that's very personal. And which is why trust is so important, and which is why for an editor it's really also important to be able to say no if you think this relationship might not work. So on that note, when it comes to editing, the difference in approaching fiction and non-fiction, what I find is with fiction I have to tread much more lightly, because fiction I feel.
But now, thanks to the book, I could leave my job, but I'm not sure that.
And I have to always, tread that fine line where I'm helping the manuscript as much as I can without stepping on my author's toes in any way whatsoever. And the ways to do that is, when you have to my method is to segregate the novel into, I look at the plot separately, I look at the way the characters develop through the novel, I look at whether the style and the author's voice is consistent through the novel, whether their literary experiments are working, and then I'll give them feedback on each of these aspects and, make sure that it's all coming together as, a holistic sort of work. To sort of give an example, I recently published a book, a novel where there was a detective who played a very important role, but I found he was just not compelling as a person, and so we tried to make him more exciting, and I said do with the detective, give them a catchphrase, give them some quirky personality traits, and then. Even though the detective's role in the novel never changed, he became a much more lively and interesting character. And it sort of changed the tone of the book, and the readability even. So these are little ways in which I address these gaps in fiction. But with non-fiction, it's a little more technical because, again, there are so many kinds of non-fiction, and non-fiction can also be very, very personal if you're writing a memoir. or if it's a very personal work of journalism. But then, there are biographies, there are scientific books, and you have to treat each of them case by case. But in nonfiction, invariably, one process that all manuscripts have to go through is a fact check. Because you are ultimately talking about things that have actually happened. And you need to make sure those facts are accurate. So there's that one slightly mechanical process that's extremely important. But the general rules remain the same, where even in nonfiction, an author will have their distinct voice, which you need to respect, and you need to bring it out as much as possible. These are some of them.
And since you've been both an author and an editor, what advice would you give to a writer who's submitting a book for publishing?
I think the first thing would be to get the manuscript as good as you possibly can before you submit it. You can't assume that because there will be an editor involved, they will catch all the problems. The truth is that if you don't do your best to edit your own manuscript first, you're unlikely to have a professional editor. Editing isn't simply about taking a raw piece of text and making it beautiful. It's most of the things that get deals are already very readable, very good, and it's about making the book stronger, as we said earlier. So I think that is really important. You have to be your own editor. So all writers do have to be editors as well, to a certain extent. Now, what that can often mean is trying to find a way to give yourself distance from your text. That can be really hard because it can be something that you've worked on for a long time, you've thought about all in your spare time and really lived that story, you've really dreamed about it, you've done everything, you may have gone to great lengths to research it, talked to all sorts of people, and you may have had all sorts of wild dreams about what will happen when your book is published and the way your life will change, some of which probably will never happen, but you cling to them, they're a wonderful thing. But you need to find a way to step away from that magic and to be your own editor. My trick for doing that is when I first finished a first draft, when I've got a working draft, I will leave it for a minimum of a month. So for a month, I may not touch that book. I cannot look at it. I cannot creep back and peep at chapter 2 and see if it's as good as I think it is. I have to wait. And after a month, I print it out and I sit with it in a ring binder, trying to pretend it's a real book, with a pen in my hand. And I read through, trying to read it as though I'm reading it for the first time. And it's written by someone else. Now, of course, I'm still very close to it, but that gives me a degree of distance. It gives me a chance to imagine how a second person might read it. And then once I've done several other drafts, I will involve readers who I trust, asking them to read the manuscript for me and tell me any bits that bother them, any bits that don't work for them, any bits they don't believe, anything that stands out, that jars them, that takes them out of the story. Now, there's a saying by the writer Neil Gaiman, he's a British-American writer, and he says, when someone tells you what's wrong, when someone tells you a scene doesn't work in your book, they're almost always right. When they tell you what doesn't work about the scene, they're almost always wrong. So really, those people for me are like alarm bells. They will ring an alarm telling me that this particular bit is a problem, and it's then my job to work out what that problem is. Once I've been through that process, I then print out the book all over again and read it out loud to myself. It takes a long time, but I read all out loud because when you read out loud, you hear a word at work differently. It tricks your brain into imagining that it hasn't seen the work before, and you can catch all sorts of awkward things that you didn't notice on the screen or on the page. Repetitions, inconsistencies, strange bits of language that don't work, odd bits of dialogue. So that's the process, the private editing process I go through before I hope that an editor will get involved. So yeah, being your own editor is important, I think.
Shruthapa, since you're also an editor and an author, if you could share your insights on your writing process, and what is it that you would advise a writer to do before sending out a manuscript?
So the first thing that I would tell an aspiring writer is don't be impatient. You know, the moment you finish your first draft, you just want somebody to read it, and the editor, you want to give it to the editor and say, okay, let the person edit and let my book come out. But just don't be impatient, be patient, rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. That is one big advice. The more you rewrite, the more ideas will come. You will look at a sentence and say, no, I wanted the construction to be different. Or you look at certain paragraphs and say, this is not working, so let's cut it all out. So you will be able to cut out the flap. And that is what Anne said, I totally believe in that, is that you need to edit your own work first. And many times, not just once. And yes, the distance, you know, the time distance between wearing an author's hat and wearing an editor's hat needs to be there. Then only you get perspective. Otherwise, you know, you will still be involved in the story and the writing of it. So those are very important things. I want to bring in here a point which is often talked about in India, which is self-publishing. The self-publishing is something that is not considered very good publishing in India. And the main reason for that is most people who self-publish think that they don't need an editorial intervention. They don't need a good editor. But if they got a good editor to go through their work and then they would self-publish, I'm sure they would be books of quality which would come out. And self-publishing would lose the kind of negative connotation that it has in India. So editorial intervention is, I would say, compulsory for any book. And you should go through the editors, whatever the editor is saying, and be open to a lot of criticism. That's what. You should be open to any change, any criticism. And I'll give you a good example. My husband doesn't read any of my books. So when I write a particular chapter and I'm not very sure about it, I read it out to him, though he makes all kinds of disgusting faces when I'm reading. But he'll come out with something on that chapter which nails it, you know. And I always take his advice very seriously. And he says, this is not working, something is wrong here in these sentences. I will immediately cut it out. So I think he is, though he doesn't read any of my books, he is my best critic.
Thank you, Shratapa. One of the things that Shratapa just said is, his advice to an author is to be patient, right? Don't be impatient. One of the criticisms of traditional publishing is that the process takes so long, right? Commissioning a book takes time, developing, structuring the book, by the time the manuscript comes in, it goes through copy editing, proofreading. This whole process may take another 6 months. It may take a year for a book to come out. Which is why many young authors, particularly today, I think take the self-publishing as an alternate route. As someone working in a traditional publishing house, what are some of the challenges of bringing out a book as quickly as possible? And would you advise an author to stick with traditional publishing, or would you suggest they try self-publishing?
I think whether you are taking your manuscript through a publishing house or you're self-publishing it, I think you need to give it the amount of time it needs to become the best version of itself. Which means it's not always, I mean, the goal should not be to publish something you've written as quickly as possible. One also needs to think about what is the best time for it to come out into the world, how much time it needs to become a great version. And when I say the best time for a book to come out, again, the biography I was talking about, the author, I mean, he's still writing it, but I know I'll have a draft in the next month. But there's this, he's also very old and he wants the book to be out as soon as possible. But we also, it's a very crowded marketplace. If you walk into a bookstore, you'll see there are new books, 30 new books in a bookstore every single day, and readers are confused about what they should pick up. There's so much noise around every book, which is why it's essential to sort of think about when a book will get maximum attention. So for this particular book, we thought it's best to bring it out on Women's Day, because there'll be so much publicity, so much talk around, women's issues. That's a great time to bring out a biography about a very interesting and an inspiring woman. Instead, if I bring it out, let's say in December, which is also in India, that's literary festival season, when every book is being talked about and every publishing house is cheerleading all of their authors, it's going to get lost. It's going to sink without a trace, and that's a huge disservice to a book that you've worked so hard to publish. I don't really, I don't want to dissuade anyone from self-publishing. I would only advise that, self-publishing should not be a shortcut to bringing your book out into the world. Self-publishing also doesn't mean you don't show your work to an editor. You can work with freelance editors. Sometimes self-publishing units will have editors of their own. And a lot of authors, I think, like self-publishing, again, because of what Stephen King said about insecurities. A lot of authors are afraid of criticism, of being told that maybe they're not even publishable writers. And that's where perhaps working with a traditional publishing house, helps you bring that sort of criticism, constructive criticism. Even though one editor from one publishing house might say that they don't think your manuscript is publishable, there are so many to choose from. It's very important to find the right fit. Somebody might not see a lot of work in your manuscript, but another editor might see something of value. So it could be an arduous process, which is why patience is so important. But I do advise all aspiring writers against rushing things.
I just wanted to add, I just remind what she said about the right time for a book. I was reminded of my first historical fiction, Padmavati. So when I started writing it, there was hardly any noise about the film Padmavat. Later on, it gathered a lot of criticism, and there were, all over India there was so much noise. But my publisher, he was very happy. He says, okay, so this film is also getting so much importance. So, you should quickly write the book so that it's like... So I was very sure about one thing. I said, I don't want the book to come out after the film, because it will seem as though it's some kind of, like I've written because of the film. I wanted definitely that it should come out before the film. And that's what my publisher did. It came out about a month before the film was released, and people had already read it and then gone to see the film. And then they could come back to me with really good positive feedback, that they could compare the film and the book, and I'm so happy that they told me that the book is better. And people also went to see the film and then read the book. So I'm very happy about that. But yes, the right time is very important when you're publishing the book.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in that, weirdly, at the time my novel came out, which is it's a psychological drama about identical twins who swap places in a childhood game and then get trapped in the wrong lives when one of them refuses to swap back. And at the time that came out, there were a number of twin novels that suddenly came out at the same time in the UK. It was one of those weird coincidences. And there were two ways of looking at it. One, you could say, oh no, this is it's going to seem like we're all copying each other. But actually, it was an advantage because it enabled people to do all sorts of articles bringing together twin novels and looking at the theme of twins. And so it actually worked in the favour of, I think, most of those books. And it's just strange, you can't predict what the zeitgeist is, and as we were saying, because publishing is such a slow process, there's no possibility of predicting what the world's going to be like when your book comes out. So it really is luck, often, that drives these things, with the possible exception of historical anniversaries and things like that. If you know in 10 years' time there's going to be a big anniversary of a war event or some big historical thing, perhaps you could be very canny and think, oh, I've always wanted to write a story that has something to do with this and maybe I can make it work like that. But that's quite rare. But when it works, it can be a real advantage.
Yes, I agree. Sometimes the universe can conspire to help your book, as it did in your case, I think. And with regard to historical anniversaries, I edited a book last year which described the Battle of Haifa and how Indian troops worked with the British troops at that time. And it was the centenary of the battle. So we brought out the book in time for that centenary. So that was an example of timing in terms of bringing out a book. Right, I think we are coming close to the end of this session, so we would like to open it up to the audience for questions. You've heard about different aspects of publishing from our seasoned editors and authors here. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands and feel free to ask. He'll just bring the mic to you, sir. If you could please introduce yourself. And, ma'am, yes.
I am a police officer retired, and I wrote one book, and I have written the second one. I want the opinion of you, especially Sutappa. You said that two-dimensional characters, you seem to be implying, and that's also true, they are not very interesting. But the aim of my book is to tell interesting stories, but also to educate my readers about the criminal justice system in India and policing. So the main protagonist in my next book would be two-dimensional, because I thought I won't be able to convey what I want to convey if I concentrate too much on developing him. You think it will work?
So you see, what happens is that you want to bring out the policing system and whether the justice system. Now that
interesting way.
Yeah. So in an interesting way, exactly. You see, we are human beings, and we relate more to human beings than abstract ideas. So if your human being can be a complete human being, an individual, a character, like you just said that a character with a quirk, probably. Then the reader relates, and the moment the reader relates, then whatever the message that comes from his voice becomes more palatable, becomes more acceptable. That is the reason we are so, focused on developing our main protagonist.
I think I just want to add, I often think that the story and the characters, they're what buy you the space to talk about the ideas. So they're what build the sort of railway tracks that can carry the train of your ideas. But without that structure, without those things in place, those engaging characters and a story that carries you along, there's nothing to carry those ideas. And so you would be better writing a non-fiction book about the system if that's the main focus. But if you want to do it in fiction, you need to create the structure that will carry the ideas you want to explore.
Yeah, structure is there. He's quirky also, but he's good.
That's okay.
So he doesn't have shades.
I wanted to add that even if you want to talk about the police system through a work of non-fiction, you could use techniques that one might use in fiction, such as you could tell a story through a few main characters who you think are interesting as people, and through the work they do, through the cases they fight, through the kind of people they meet, you could reveal what happens as part of the police system, instead of just sort of presenting facts in a more straightforward manner. Because in that way you are giving readers the facts while also telling engaging human stories about people who live very differently from us, which makes us curious about these other lives that we've never known.
Thank you.
Yes, I think, sir, you had a question?
No, if there's anybody else, I'll wait.
There's a young boy on the
No,
left.
he should get priority. Yeah.
Sorry, please can you take the mic then?
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Good morning to all. My question is to leading a book as a good or populace, whose performance is so important as compared to writer as a writing and editor as a editing?
Is your question to anyone particular on the panel or generally to all of us?
All of us.
Okay, so if I've understood your question, you're saying who has the biggest contribution in making a book popular? Is it the writer or the editor? Is that your question?
Yes.
I think it's a huge team effort. So the writer, of course, who has the original idea, puts in all the hard work, writing, creating that manuscript, who is courageous enough to give it to a publisher and say, here's my work, I'm bearing my heart and soul, take a look at it. the editor who then takes it on, decides to publish it, the copy editor or line editor who then develops, works with the manuscript closely, cover design, that designs the cover, marketing, sales, that go out and sell it. So publishing is a huge team effort that requires a very large number of people. And let us not forget the audience that reads it, and increasingly today, publishes reviews on social media, word of mouth. You may read a book which you like, you will tell your friend may also want to buy it or read it. So, and let us not forget libraries as well. There's a reading culture in India that still depends on libraries. So there's tremendous inputs that go into making a book popular and successful. Yeah. If anyone has one.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say, but I'll try to condense my thoughts. I completely agree that it is often a huge team effort, but I would also, I mean, there are authors who sometimes feel that it's a bit of a pressure on them, to perform in ways that they don't feel comfortable, because a lot of writers are, they prefer solitude, they are private people. They don't want to be on panels of this sort, which could be a disadvantage in this day and age when, again, in a crowded marketplace, you need to cheer for your book as loudly as possible. And I mean, this is a little secret, it's an open secret, but often editors do feel tempted to sign on books from authors who may not write fantastically well, but they have a massive Twitter following, because editors are also responsible for bringing in not just great books, but also books that are saleable. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to...
Yeah, I think I would agree. It is a team effort, and I think in the case of individual books, the answer will be different. There may well be one book where the writing was brilliant, and 90% of it was about the work that the writer did. And the book sold itself because it was such an intriguing idea and so well written. And so the publisher really didn't have to do very much other than publish it and just let people know about it, and it did itself. It did the rest itself. But then there will be other instances where a manuscript comes in and it's very raw, and the editor works long and hard to bring it into shape, and the rest of the team do, and then the marketing team think of some really creative ideas to get people to hear about it, and they put a huge amount of effort and money and time into it. And then you could say that it's much more that side of the equation that has made that book a success. But broadly speaking, I think it evens out. So probably, on average, it is very much an equal effort, I think.
Thank you.
Young lady in the middle who has a question. Can we get the microphone to her, please? Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. It was nice hearing you all out. I am Tanim Mazumdar, and I am from IS Public School. I am sure that as editors, as readers, first of all, before you were an editor, you had your likes and dislikes. So while reading a book, sometimes you might not find it interesting. Like, it might not be something which is that genre must not suit you. Then, but you can still understand that this book might be good for others. Then, how do you proceed with it? Because editing is a very hard job, and so wouldn't you find boring in the middle or something like that? How something which, if you were a reader, would not be interesting to you, how do you make it? How do you go about it in making it interesting?
That's a very good question, because as an editor, you're right. You may find a manuscript that you may find boring, but it still works. So how does one go about doing it? Yeah, Shutapa, if you'd like to take it up.
So yeah, that can often happen, that there is something that you find boring and that comes to you as a manuscript that you need to edit. But then as an editor, you need to also be objective and keep yourself aloof from whatever is the topic or the subject of that. And with some experience, you also know which is the target audience which would find this interesting. So keeping that target audience in mind, you will start editing the book. So you do move away from being a reader when you are an editor. That is necessary, so that you get the perspective and you get sort of, you have the objectivity.
And while, again, I totally agree with you, Shutapa, but again, because editing is also a very human job, it is often the case, like you said, while I'm trying to edit a manuscript, I may lose interest, or even when I'm thinking about whether I want to publish something, I might not want to at the end of the day, even while knowing that it is a publishable manuscript and it is going to find a lot of takers. What then an editor might do is, if hopefully they are not the only editor in that organization, you can pass it on to a colleague, who might find it a lot more interesting. Because that also plays a huge role in that editor-author relationship. If you can't really believe in that manuscript, it's going to show in your work, and your author will sort of find you out.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's really important because I've had the experience of being passed between editors because one editor left a company and my work got passed on to someone who hadn't chosen my work. And in fact, that happened 4 times with my first novel for various unfortunate reasons, people having babies, people getting promoted, people, all kinds of things. And everyone who I worked with subsequent to the person who had loved my book and really wanted to work on it was very professional and really good and did their best, but they didn't have that same love, which means that you're thinking about it when you're brushing your teeth at night or first thing in the morning or getting the bus or whatever it might be. And that's, you can't buy that, really. It's so important. And so I think when you're a commissioning editor like Tisa, you have to a degree, well, a large degree of control over what you take on, and so you can mostly work on things that you're really passionately interested in. I've sometimes worked with private clients on work that I I'm not terribly interested in all the time, and then you have to be professional, and you do your work. Generally, as a private editor, you're not doing the job that Tisa does where you're getting that book champions and cheerleaders. You're simply getting it to be publishable. So it's not about you putting that passion in, it's about you making it professional. And in that case, it's like any job. All jobs have interesting days and not so interesting days, and you just do your work. But I still enjoy working with words, and I enjoy making words better, and so that's the reward there. But you can always find, the joy of books is it's a lovely world to work in, and you can always find something joyful in it, even if it's not loving the book itself entirely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the loveliest things about your question is that you correctly identified that all editors are readers first. All of us are in this profession because we love books and we share the joy of reading. And that's why it's so lovely to see so many young people here who obviously share the love of reading too. Yeah. I think this has to be the last question because we are running out of time.
That's fine. Yeah. It's a very short question. It's a very crass, materialistic question. I'm Ada Thomas, editor of Indian Literature, Science Academics. You see, what kind of pay are you paying your workforce, your copy editors? Do you get good people for the kind of money you're paying?
Yes, at the end of the day, of course, books have to sell and publishing companies also have to pay their editors. One of the things I would say that has happened in India over the last decade has been a boom in publishing. We have a very large pool of talented young people. We have the language skills in our country. And Anne would know, of course, many publishers from the West have been outsourcing work to India. I myself have worked for a large UK-based publisher, and over 100 jobs moved to India. And this is the nature of economics, right? That a same job which can be done there will cost the company much more. The same job in India will cost the company less, but will earn a decent salary in India. So somebody who's trying for a job in academia, where there may be fewer positions, may shift to publishing, where there may be new jobs opening up. So it is very much part of the new digital economy and many, for instance, scientific and technical journals are entirely edited in India now. Some of the world's leading journal publishers have moved their entire production to India. So particularly with the advent of publishing MNCs, I think this is a very interesting profession for young people. I think it's a wonderful profession for women. Publishing, particularly copy editing, employs a very large number of women in their workforce. You keep learning on the job. You're always learning something new. You're related to knowledge and continuously adding to your own knowledge base. So with regard to salaries, well, of course, that is a factor of the market. But I think it's an industry that offers many opportunities, some of which goes beyond money. And of course, we are all here for the love of books and reading. Yeah. Okay, so I think we have to wind up now. So all that's left for me to do is to thank the organizers for bringing us here today. Thank you for being such a lovely audience and asking such relevant and interesting questions. The topic of our session was Edit Without Mercy. This is taken from a quote by Ernest Hemingway, who said, "Write without fear, edit without mercy." So let me end with that thought. Write without fear, and give your books to us to edit without mercy. Thank you.
Session, and the panelists Sutapa Basu, Tista Guha Sarkar, and Morgan for this beautiful session. And all attendees, thank you so much. Please be seated. Our next session will start shortly.